So if you haven't been watching the news, and who could blame you, GameStop has been trying to sell itself, like the entire company, over the last few months, but as of this past Tuesday, decided to abandon those plans because it turns out nobody actually wants to buy GameStop. We had a joke all set to go about several buyers having expressed interest but deciding against it when GameStop refused to take any more used copies of Sears as trade-in credit, but honestly, there's nothing funny about any of this. GameStop, less than a decade ago, still riding high at the center of a boom time for console gaming, now being unable to attract a buyer basically means that the market reality has shifted so profoundly that the clock is probably about to simply run out on the company and with it the idea of specialty games retail itself. And it's as irritating as it is unsurprising that the gamer culture largely didn't seem to know about this, or worse, consider it to be either an innate irrelevancy at this point or even a good thing because, hey, screw GameStop, right? Now, look, GameStop sucks. You won't hear me argue that. It's shady, it's pricey, it's tacky, you have to deal with the mall, they try to upsell you on crap you don't need, scummy policies, mostly a toy store at this point, and there's a certain karma to the idea of them going under because digital sales are basically wiping out physical media because they push smaller chains and indie game stores out of business to get where they are in the first place. I get that attitude. I just also know that it's wrong, because it's the same attitude people had when things started to go south for Blockbuster, and yeah, Blockbuster was a shitty company that itself did a number on mom and pop video stores before Netflix and Amazon did the same to them, but it didn't change the fact that it still effectively meant the end of physical movie retail, and as a film critic and film fan, I can tell you that movie culture has indeed been made permanently worse as a result in specific important ways, chiefly the loss of connection, loss of community, loss of access, loss of consumer power. Not uncoincidentally, all things that the loudest self-described hardcore gamers will always shout the loudest that they are committed to, but will, in my experience, also be the first to trade away at the slightest inconvenience, meaning that I have effectively zero confidence that the gaming scene will not suffer the same loss if the retailer we all love to hate really is in as bad a shape as it seems to be now. At the basest level, no matter how useful online shopping is, and I'm certainly not some Luddite against internet retail, the loss of brick-and-mortar retail of any kind as an option for consumers is in fact a loss of community and human connection. One less place to go and encounter people in multiple different contexts for the sake of it, and also for the necessary perspective reset that the other end of a transaction still involves a person or persons whose life is as valid as yours. But specific to gaming, the retreat from physical to digital spaces in general has been an overwhelmingly toxifying transformation for a medium that previously relied on physical and tactile component of interaction, both in playing games themselves and just interacting with the medium more broadly, to curb the ugly flip sides of isolation and detachment innate to so much of the video gaming experience. Yes, online gaming has expanded communities and connections in its own right, but it's no accident that the fading away of actual human contact, acknowledgement, and consequence once found in the atmosphere of the arcade and local multiplayer directly preceded the rapid emergence of a genuine dark side within the subculture. Yes, I'm aware that they still sell physical games at big box stores, for now. Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you go down to Best Buy and tell me how their CD section is looking? Exactly. Oh, and speaking of which, are there any oldish, quirky stuff you maybe wanted to grab off the Wii Shop channel? Well, too bad. It's gone now. This isn't about being anti-digital distribution any more than it is being pro-GameStop, alright? I like digital media sales, especially for gaming. It provides a space for independent developers to thrive and be visible, cuts down on waste, good for the environment, good for gamers in difficult regions, and accessibility issues, all vital and positive evolutions of the medium and the market. But I like it best as a companion to physical sales, not a replacement, because the key important thing that digital can't replace about physical media is the freedom and power it grants you, the consumer, you, the gamer, you. Look, there's a lot of nagging irritations I do dislike about digital sales and storefronts in gaming, many of them surrounding the frankly pathetic Apple-esque corporate filleting, consumption cult religious fervor people attach to f***ing Steam.
Come along, you belong, feel the fizz of Coca-Cola.
And the manipulatively panderific pro-consumer ass-patting Valve engages in to keep it at a rolling boil, but my main problem is that digital only effectively erases media ownership as a concept. We're all just renting at full price now, and they change the terms or yank things away whenever they want. And if you do call yourself pro-consumer or anti-censorship especially, you should have serious concerns about the implications of that, because a world where physical media ceases to be and everything is digital is one where any company can decide they don't want that game you bought to have the same designs or elements or anything else about its content as it did when you bought it anytime they want, or even to exist at all, and you can't do a damn thing about it. Now I know someone out there is sneering, yeah, well, GameStop is really just for toys and used games anyway, to which I say, again, this is less about GameStop than it is about why you should care about the impending end of physical game sales, period. But since you asked, firstly, a thriving used game scene is one of the ways we kept some level of consumer-level archiving in existence. The games industry clearly isn't interested in its own actual history. And as to toys, up front I talked about the idea of community and how much the real-life component to that continues to be lost in gaming. And I know not everyone who's into games is also into the merch and associated products and plasticky nerd culture ephemera associated with even their favorites, but a lot of people are, and moreover, I genuinely think that a lot of the positive, social, communal, humanistic aspects of the games culture gets expressed through these extended elements of gaming narratives, characters, iconography, being incorporated by people into their own self-styled aesthetic, acting as a tactile piece of the shared experience. There's value, or there can be value, in the idea that those elements can be appreciated apart from their source function as expressions of the ones and zeros and challenge component of the games themselves, in the idea that a plush Pokemon can become a cherished object that potentially outlives one's connection to any of the individual games, or that a gaming shirt, coffee mug, keychain, or whatever becomes someone's favorite one of those, and that the bigger, broader idea that this, yes, often tacky, usually disposable, and unnecessary stuff can be the signifiers by which gamers identify each other outside of gaming-centered spaces and friends who might not have become so meet in the first place. Look, everyone who's ever shopped there has a dozen shitty GameStop stories, but how many gamers also have happy stories of being able to find the game they couldn't anywhere else there, or happened on a game they'd never have heard of that turned out to be a favorite? How many incidental memories about figure collecting or card trading don't exist without multiple visits? How many first jobs were had there? So yeah, GameStop is basically a chintzy gaming-themed pawn shop at the end of the day, but especially in the US, if you're not in a major city with a thriving con circuit or even a gaming meetup scene, which is a lot of places, people, seriously, the further you get from the parts of this country that touch like saltwater or Canada, there's quite a few stretches that are basically just Fury Road with a couple more mega churches and Chick-fil-A's. I mean, not everybody gets to go to E3 or PAX or whatever. The local GameStop was often it for any sense of real-world games community. And if your response to that is, well, that's sad, yeah, it is. And I'm not looking forward to it getting any worse. Just a thought. So there's a new Mortal Kombat coming out, because sure, and this one has celebrity mocap and voice acting and a loot system for adding cosmetic doodads to your outfits. Cool. Hey NetherRealm, you ever gonna call up Capcom and make Street Fighter vs. Mortal Kombat happen? Cause it's weird that I can have Ryu and Ken fight like Isabelle from Animal Crossing now, or see Chun-Li fight the chick from Battle of the Planets, but if I want to see Cammy take an inverted head scissors from Milena, I've got to pay cash up front to a commissioner. I mean, imagine it offhandedly while doing something otherwise normal and healthy. Ahem. So anyway, people are mad online because Mortal Kombat 11 opted to revamp its character designs, and as part of that, they're taking a new approach when it comes to the body shape and costuming for their female fighters, with art director Steve Baran telling Polygon back in March, "We don't have bathing suit fighters, and I think that's fine. If people are disappointed, I don't regret making that change by any means." You can say that again. For some gamers, disappointed is evidently an understatement. When it comes to their reactions to the new looks afforded to longtime franchise faves like Sonya Blade, Kitana, Purple Kitana, Green Kitana, Also Kitana, Sexy Goro, and the rest, the angry young men of the web are feeling positively deflated. Like their cups are half full, like there's not enough for them to grasp. Flattened, like they came to breakfast and there was no melon. No snack trays at all, in fact. To them, it seems like MK11 offers no bounce, no hills to climb, so they rack their brains for the memories of the last one. Now, apparently the spot where the franchise has peaked. They're mad that they made the breasts smaller, okay? That's the long and short of it. They've got generally less outsized proportions than previously, and the outfits are less revealing overall because they went in a different direction aesthetically, and also I guess the tacked on sounding loot system. Why does a fighting game need a loot system, by the way? That sounds dumb. Is all about costume decoration, so they need more fabric to hang it all on. Whatever. It's a choice. It's their game. It can look like whatever the hell they want it to. Now, to get the obvious and important stuff out of the way, holy shit, being angry about this is gross and dumb, and did I mention gross, even for an angry dude video game non-traversy. Like, I'm not gonna kink shame if you like CGI ninja girls and you wish they were more likeable. In this context, whatever, you do you. But getting as mad about it as some people get about, like, civil rights is kind of grotesque. Perspective, okay? Also, if that's an A cup where you're from, where are you from? No, but seriously, where? And what's the rent like? In any case, this is pretty cut and dry. Yeah, the guys who make Mortal Kombat can make the characters look however they want because they're the guys who make Mortal Kombat. Nobody's gonna make you buy the new game, and if you don't want to now because you'd prefer the women had bigger breasts and wore less clothes on them, that's okay, it's your money. But if you're being gross and sexist and shitty about it online, that's not okay, and you should probably chill the hell out and get help, okay? Okay. Can I just ask one more thing though? Well, I'm gonna do it anyway, it's my show. Okay, so like I said, people who are losing their shit about this, gross, sad, wrong, etc. Designers should do what they want. Apparently what they want is to take their design in a more mature direction, and okay, that's your heart being in the right place, but isn't a lot of Mortal Kombat literally and figuratively about hearts not being in the right place?
Fatality.
Now again, I'm on the developer's side here, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that this is only a sincere attempt at an aesthetic change of pace and not driven in part by making a big deal out of having paid actual pseudo-celebrities a bunch of money to be in the game and looking more or less like their realistically proportioned selves, and thus maybe they had to dial everyone else back in order to make it look less ridiculous by comparison, since that might sound vaguely conspiratorial, and if there's one thing Mortal Kombat does not want, it's the much ballyhooed stunt casting of Sonya Blade to be associated with conspiracy theories. What I mean instead is taking a second look at are we being unnecessarily sexist or unwelcoming is a good instinct for any creative professional to have when examining the continuation of a long-running, formerly niche audience property in an increasingly visible and diverse medium. Question assumptions, check your work, don't stand on meaningless tradition, etc. Revisit the male gaze, ask why things that seem obvious are obvious, why things that just are. Fine, but I do wonder if there's a point, earlier for some games than others, where there stops being a point. To put it bluntly, Mortal Kombat is sleazy trash. I love Mortal Kombat because Mortal Kombat is sleazy trash. Mortal Kombat looks and feels like a cross between 70s Shaw Brothers kung fu movies and knockoff high fantasy art you'd airbrush on a panel van in the 80s. Spills blood like the story of Ricky and runs on a hook and enter the memorized special attack button combo faster engine, and that's why it's awesome. It's a shallow, visceral, juvenile lizard brain experience. That's why it rules. So whereas gaming overall moving into a zone where it's not an obvious go-to default for every woman character to look like the sexy Halloween costume version of whatever her job is, in Mortal Kombat's case, it's kind of, if not appropriate, at least on brand, isn't it? Like, obviously you need to look out for stuff that's outright misogyny, hateful, assaultive, and there's tons of widely available writing in academia about the feminist traditions of burlesque and sex-positive erotic art design for how to do hypersexual but not demeaningly objectified character presentation of that type, of which I'm not an expert on, but you know, it's out there, you can look it up. But when you tell me you're trying to get more mature and dignified in the aesthetics of Mortal freaking Kombat.
Oh, this is a fine, elegant Harvey Volksbanker.
I mean, okay, it's your game, you do you, but should I assume that also means that, like, the Tom and Jerry physics, the cross-cultural sensitivity, the Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe approach to subtlety in voice acting? Every human body containing 800 gallons of blood under aerosol pressure, that's all going away too, right? Because otherwise, I'm not sure if mature is the word you're looking for here. And in that case, not that it needs to be there, but dopey shit like Sonya wearing her flak jacket with cleavage showing for no reason, and Katana looking like she just jumped out of a historically insensitive 19th century French Orientalist painting kind of goes with that whole Todd McFarlane by way of Andy Sedaris scene, you know what I mean?
He has a full house, but she's got an ace up her sleeve. The sextet of gorgeous, gunslinging playmates. Eric Estrada with a license to kill. And Donna Spear with a license to thrill. Guns. An Andy Sedaris film.
You know, some games just kind of are what they are. Remember when Doom 3 tried to be a serious survival horror thing and it sucked, and then they did Doom again and it was good because they accepted, no, this is Doom. It's a dumb, fun, time waster thing where you shoot hell monsters with a machine gun. Well, Mortal Kombat ain't mature. Mortal Kombat is juvenile. Mortal Kombat is awesome, wonderful, stupid, sleazy garbage. If Mortal Kombat doesn't make you feel a little bit embarrassed to still be enjoying it past the age of 16, it's not doing its job right. So yeah, internet dudes crying about cup sizes, gross and terrible. Mortal Kombat guys looking to not be catering exclusively to that scene, understandable, very good instinct. But I just hope it doesn't mean that they overcorrect and forget that even if Mortal Kombat correctly wants to stop being gross, it should probably still be pretty nasty. Just a thought. Well, hey, this episode is running on the 4th of July. Happy birthday, America. Congratulations on still existing. Technically, sort of, in a manner of speaking. Anyway, gaming may be an international medium, played and made all over the world, occasionally dominated at competition by Korea or culture by Japan, but there's no denying that the United States has always been extremely extremely represented. I'm the Game OverThinker, and these are the 10 greatest Americans in video games. Is there anything more American than punching Nazis? No, there is not. B.J. Blazkowicz has been taking it to the Third Reich across several wars and timelines since the original Wolfenstein, and it clearly runs in the family since canonically, he's supposedly the ancestor of the original Doom protagonist and will be meeting his trigger-happy twin daughters in the next Wolfenstein spin-off, so maybe it's family that's more American than punching Nazis. Nope, it's still punching Nazis. Always punch Nazis. Dead or Alive is a series of Japanese tournament fighting games about learning a surprisingly deep fighting engine in order to describe said fighting engine in enough detail to convince your friends that you're not just playing to see the girls bounce around in their victory animations. True to form, Tina Armstrong always makes sure to put the stars and stripes right where she knows you're going to be looking anyway, and her backstory as the glory-seeking daughter of a legendary professional wrestler looking to score an acting career by proving herself in a legit martial arts tournament is all about independence. Plus, in the Dead or Alive movie, she was played by North Carolina's own Jamie Presley, who's so all-American she was in Can't Hardly Wait, Joe Dirt, My Name is Earl, and the Jerry Springer movie. So she's basically like an apple pie with a SAG card. In this one-time Japan-only cult classic by From Software, the evil Vice President of the United States, Richard Hawke, stages a military coup piloting a powerful mech suit. The only hope to stop him, rightful President Michael Wilson, a descendant of Woodrow Wilson, using his own mech suit, which somehow still sounds like a better way of deciding these things than the Electoral College. Okay, according to most Western-published Nintendo media relating to the Super Mario Bros. Continuity prior to the late 1990s, Mario and Luigi have the appearance and affect of mid-20th century East Coast Italian-American stereotypes because they're originally plumbers from Brooklyn, New York. Then after Yoshi's Island, it was retconned that they were babies in the Mushroom Kingdom, and it's now largely unclear what happened in between that point, but Brooklyn hasn't come up in a while, and well, too f***ing bad. It's my list, and I'm still counting it, and Mario totally wore the Stars and Stripes in NES Open Golf, and they brought that outfit back for Odyssey, so he goes on the list. As the ultimate villain of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, Senator Armstrong, no relation, is not a good guy and he doesn't have a good plan, but he does have one of the biggest and most extreme plans in the Metal Gear canon, and even among Metal Gear franchise bad guys, the super on-the-nose symbology of a far-right military-industrious politician beefing himself up into a roided-out science Hulk to beat down the hero is American as hell in the best of the worst ways. Yes, the bad dudes had names, and they were Blade and Stryker. Together, they saved the President of the United States from an army of, like, several thousand ninjas pretty much on a dare, especially since it seems like they didn't get any money or like a commission or cabinet post out of it. They pretty much just got that burger. Either way, they were patriots. Kind of feel like you wouldn't necessarily have two super competent karate masters jumping up to do that job today, you know? Like, I mean, I know we don't really have as much of like a ninja problem as we used to, but I still kind of feel like if it was breaking news tomorrow that the president had been kidnapped by ninjas, most people today would be like, yeah, all right, that's okay. We're okay. That's fine. We're fine. I mean, I'm sure they'll give him back when they're done with, you know, whatever. You know what's American? Being extra. We're the nation of extra cheese, extra meat, extra patties, extra buns, stuffed crust, supersize it. Yes, I want fries with that, double wide, monster truck living, and that's how we do it. Hell, we got 50 states, and we're really only using like 7 of them most of the time. I mean, does anyone really need 2 whole Dakotas? I mean, hell, like, I ain't supposed to tell you this if you ain't from here, but one of the states in this circle, I can't say which one, doesn't even have people in it. Like, for real, nobody's there. It's just a big hangar for storing bulk-size Chef Boyardee. Anyway, Jax is extra. Only black guy in Mortal Kombat 2? Not enough. He's got to get robot arms. Robot arms not enough? He's got to pull somebody else's arms off in a fatality. Internet soft boys weren't mad enough at Mortal Kombat 11 because Scarlet had a hat on or whatever. He's got to go back in time and end slavery, because he's extra. And that's America. Depending on how you look at it, Street Fighter series' international roster of outlandish fighters is either a collection of often shockingly embarrassing ethnic caricatures, cultural stereotypes, and racial fetishism that unavoidably highlights the retrograde view of foreigners, minorities, and marginalized groups still considered acceptable in too much of Japanese entertainment media, or it's a diverse collection of identities and avatars allowing generations of gamers the chance to find a character that speaks to their experience. No, it's actually just the first one. It's entirely the first one. It's kind of hard to argue that it's not the first one. Still, Street Fighter's thinly veiled hierarchy of noble, pure-souled fighters from Japan and fighters not from Japan who are either genetic freaks of nature or pinup girl meant that Guile was many a white male American gamer in the 90s' first experience at seeing themselves caricatured in the same way, though perhaps not a lot of the same historical baggage as, well, some of the others. Sure, vain macho prick who hangs out combing his hair on an army base like it's a goddamn gym parking lot isn't the sickest burn that could have been delivered under the circumstances, but there was definitely no ignoring where this guy was supposed to come from. At least not until Johnny Bravo did basically the same gag later on. No, seriously, same basic guy, take a look. Now, it's possible to miss that the Japanese designers of Street Fighter may not have necessarily intended Colonel Guile to be a wholly flattering caricature of American servicemen. No more heroes, beam saber wielding, anime ogling, assassin for hire, wrestler mimicking fanboy anti-hero. On the other hand, there's no mistaking Travis as anything but Suda51's dark dressing down of American popular culture and otaku gamer culture in particular. And yet there's also something almost eventually endearing about this slovenly, self-destructive douchebag of a man-child that indicates Suda is thinking a bit more deeply on his subject than the flippant treatment suggests. There's a grim, resigned sincerity to Travis and the blighted city of Santa Destroy that indicates an understanding of the existence of America on the fringes that goes beyond just parody. Travis Touchdown is the dark side of the American dream, but it's a dream all the same. A consistent theme of Saints Row 4 is that it keeps trying to be funny and instead ends up really endearing, charming, and even genuinely meaningful, while also still being really funny. They let you customize your The Boss character with an almost absurd level of freedom as a broad joke about the tabula rasa nature of game protagonists and end up with a genuinely all-inclusive gender, race, sexuality representative paradigm. They let you literally fuck anything that moves to goof on Mass Effect romance options and sorta for real outwoked BioWare in that regard. And in cranking the absurdity of the de rigueur video game action movie surrogate family trope up to 11,000, it ended up creating a sense of real camaraderie you couldn't help but be legitimately invested in. So even though the boss becoming the president in Saints Row 4 is making fun of exactly the kind of absurd video game story arcs seen elsewhere on this very list, in the same way the Third Street Saints themselves end up endeared to us, whatever persona you placed onto You're the Boss ultimately comes to embody a genuinely profound modern realization of one of the most cherished American mythic ideals, that anyone, in this case even a character who started out as a low-life gang member, became a pseudo-celebrity and then a mercenary, and may very well be of fluid or wholly ambiguous race, gender, sexuality, and what have you, can become president. And you know, like so much about my country, as imperfect and questionable in reality as that particular piece of our mythos is, it's still a pretty nice idea. Happy birthday, America. Please get your shit together. From Software released a new game, this time with Samurai, and it's been out for a bit, which means it's time for us to go through the tiresome ritual of someone somewhere bringing up the phrase easy mode, half of gamer culture having a collective cow about it, and the other half having a cow about the first half having had a cow. And you know, people ask me why this show used to be more of a comedy about fight scenes with magic ninjas. And it's because the alternative was having to actually engage directly with crap like this. I mean, we used to do puns. Don't you like puns?
I was actually wondering where the music was. The what now? Well, you said this was a karaoke bar. Oh, no. This is Gary Oak's bar. See?
Your green screen is terrible, and you should feel terrible about it.
Anyway.
Alright, so the TLDR here is that From Software is mostly known for making Dark Souls and its adjacent spin-offs and play-alikes, which are really granular, super hard hack-and-slash games, chiefly beloved by those who beloved them for being really difficult but in a fair way that doesn't cheat. So through trial and error you can really learn the systems and balance and teach yourself to be good enough so that it's not so difficult and success feels like a real accomplishment after a sense. They've also developed something of a unique stylistic aesthetic and internal mythologies, which you really only get to see if you really do master that severe difficulty, which leads some to ask whether or not it would ever make sense to include an easy mode for novice or new players, or just those less skilled who'd like to see what the big deal is, and others to violently reject the idea on the basis that challenges what these games are all about, and thus circumventing that is missing the whole point, whatever that means. What I've never understood about that is, so what? Who cares? I genuinely don't see why this doesn't begin and end with if the developers want to include one they should, and if they don't they shouldn't, the end. I mean, they publish large print books for people who can't see too well. They publish books in different languages for people who don't speak the original language. What's the big goddamn deal? I mean, shouldn't that be the end of it in any games conversation ever, unless you're like an investor or the developer's boss or anyone who has a financial stake in it and would have an opinion outside the bounds of what's best for creative integrity and player enjoyment? Otherwise, adjustable difficulty of any kind seems like the least controversial thing in the world to me, especially if you're not nerfing the rest of the game or taking anything out. No one's making you play an easy version if you don't want to. Nothing tangible's getting lost on your end and other people are gaining. That's the kind of win-win that only gets to happen in video games. We should celebrate the fact that this is one of the things that makes this hobby so cool. It can create new spaces without removing or decreasing an existing space. Almost nothing else can say that. But instead you always wind up with an angry blowback that's furious at the very idea someone else might get to enjoy this or that game in a different way than you did, or seeing the ending without putting in the work, or getting good like you did. And so what? It's a game, it's a toy, it's for fun, leisure. It's not your job or your life. It's something to do to unwind from your job and life, isn't it? Because if it's not, I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, it's part of my job, but I live in a TV, and I'm miserable. Look, I'm not denigrating the achievement of beating a hard game on hard, but someone else doing it on easy doesn't take away from that, does it? You know you did it, and you're the only one that can really matter to. There's not a cash prize or a social advancement of any real kind, or a tangible benefit to this other than the sense of personal pride, which is entirely subjective to the individual. Plus, it is a video game, fellas. Like, Dark Souls isn't boot camp, you're not training for anything. Even Flight Simulator isn't an actual flight simulator. To be honest, I don't even get this attitude when it comes to actual sports. Like every couple of years, there's a new crop of assholes has kids in youth sports for the first time and freaks out about participation trophies, and we get these douchebag articles about how if everyone gets a trophy just to feel good about themselves, they'll grow up not learning the hard lessons of losing and achievement and not believing that meritocracy exists. Okay, first off, meritocracy does not exist. Holy shit, did you not see what Aunt Becky might be going to jail for? Look, even if it did exist, any meritocracy that's ever been instituted or attempted to be instituted in the history of human civilization has only ever lasted as long as it's taken the first rich and or powerful man to raise an idiot son that he didn't hate. And then that shit went right out the window and Prince Dumbass II inherited everything anyway. Secondly, yeah, I'm really sure that you did your best trophy that he got in T-ball is what taught your kid that the world doesn't run on justice or merit, and not like murderers not going to jail, bad cops not going to jail, presidents not going to jail. Pull the other one, bro. And this makes me especially raw because I come from the era of Nintendo hard and arcade difficulty that this whole get good attitude fetishizes, back when games were broken and super hard to make them challenging and replayable, so I know firsthand that the idea that we just practiced till we were good at it was bullshit. No, we didn't. We cheated. Game magazines and help guides and tip lines weren't full of strategies and ways to time out your jumps and finger exercises to work on your reflexes. They were full of codes and cheats, places to clip through the walls, ways to unlock the developer menu and skip ahead to the end, extra life modes to turn you into a bullet sponge, passwords to unlock all the gear without earning it. Hell, do you know what this is? This is called a Game Genie. It's an override key you'd put between the cartridge and the console so you could hack the game with codes without having to actually learn to code.
I use it when I want to live forever, play to the end, and win. Maybe I want to start on level 15. No problemo. It makes cool games like Street Fighter 2 more exciting. Less frustrating. With Game Genie, it ain't over. So we say it's over. Excellent!
Game Genie for NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, and Game Boy.
Yeah, so much for retro hard. Look, if developers don't want to put in easy mode, that's their call, but I see no reason for anyone to have an issue with accessibility being added to a game when no one's forcing you to use it. And if you're worried that the option will be too tempting for you to use if it is there, well, maybe you should get good at resisting that. Just a thought. Anthony John Agnello, another of our terrific editors and contributors here on The Escapist, had a great piece up on the site recently that you should definitely give a read that's all about VR and gaming and how virtual reality is both this really cool thing finally coming into its own and also the interesting paradox of how, for all the talk about how it puts you deeper into a game, it also kind of does the opposite by making you even more aware of how limited your actions therein actually are. Anyway, reading it got me thinking about a whole lot of things, and for a change, it wasn't just about how I'm actually old enough to remember when virtual reality first emerged as a concept, and thus also old enough to remember just how often the gaming and/or tech industry has assured me, no, really, VR is gonna work this time. This time. This time. No, for real though, this time. This time. No, this time. No, for real, this time we got it.
Forces of darkness, empower me. Take me back to my virtual reality.
Of the virtual world.
But okay, what it mainly got me thinking about was something that really pisses me off about video games in general lately, because yes, I am a grump, so even nice, thoughtful things about gaming will very quickly remind me of something that pisses me off, and that's the constant talk about immersion. This is a word that I didn't feel like I used to hear all that much when it came to games and games design outside the specific VR niche, but now I hear all the time, and it always seems to describe some annoying or pretentious design decision that's invariably making a game less intuitive or less enjoyable to me anyway, or obtuse in some way, but I'm supposed to regard as either necessary or an outright stroke of genius for increasing my sense of being immersed in the game, usually as it relates to narrative or interactivity choices. Why is this already somewhat esoteric storyline being pieced out or fragmented or relayed environmentally instead of just telling me what the scenario I'm supposed to be involved in here? It's more immersive that way. Why is the inventory mapped to the trigger scrolling? Why can't I just pause and bring up a full menu? Pausing and digging through your inventory would break the spell of immersion. Now yes, I pick on those two examples because they're both obviously bullshit. The reason for those design annoyances is entirely because all of game development today is overwhelmingly focused on the big money prize of online multiplayer open world, where pausing is less of a thing because it has to be, so you have to be going through inventory on the fly mid-action, and storytelling needs to be communicated in a way that still gets across while people are futzing around with their friends or doing stuff out of order rather than just, you know, showing a damn cutscene. And if this means the single player experience is going to get degraded in the process, apparently that just doesn't fucking matter. Either way, with apologies to the game designers out there to whom, for a change, I do not mean this in any way as a personal attack of some kind, I do not give a shit about immersion when it comes to games, and I cannot imagine I'm alone in this because, well, video games aren't immersive. They're interactive. And that very interaction, the fact that I am constantly aware that I am in control of the events taking place in front of me, and that they either progress or do not based around my engagement, is what ensures that I cannot become immersed in them. That's not a criticism, that's just a description of how a video game works. Now look, I'm sure your game is lovely and you put a ton of time into it and maybe Immersion was somewhere on your whiteboard under project goals, but unless your name is Allegra Geller and you want me to plug one of those Existence pod things into my spine or jack me into the Matrix or whatever, I'm not going to get immersed in anything, and it's not even what I showed up for. I didn't buy Spider-Man to be Spider-Man. Being Spider-Man sounds dangerous and exhausting. I'm playing Spider-Man to push buttons that make Spider-Man do cool stuff.
Try to get up there in time, Spider-Man!
Watch me cut my web, Goblin.
Watch yourself fall, Silk Slinger!
Holy Hannah!
And you're running out of fluid!
Is this more action than even Spider-Man can handle?
Even my favorite games with my most beloved characters, worlds, aesthetics, stories, whatever, with the exception of playing like a survival horror game with the lights off if I want a better jump scare, even as a little kid I was never like, in this moment I am Mario or Mega Man or Link or Rygar or Kiko Cubicle or Strider or whoever. I always knew I was playing a video game. I always know I'm playing a video game, interactively, not immersively. Immersion, to me at least, is more of a passive sensation, like when I binge watch TV or there's a movie I really like and I don't really have anything else to do immediately at the same time, you know? Like, oh wow, today sucked, time to pour some scotch and binge watch Miss Sherlock. That, or like a good rock concert or a movie theater experience, is immersion entertainment to me. With video games, I'm not immersed, I can't be. The circumstances of playing one don't allow for it. I know I'm not Spider-Man or Kratos or Bayonetta or whoever, because I can see them on the TV and the borders of the TV screen and my stuff on the shelves and the wall. I can feel the controller and buttons in my hands, feel my feet on the ottoman. I'm constantly aware that I'm sitting on my couch and not striding through the verdant plains of Hyrule, and I'm fine with it. Because it's a goddamn video game. Getting to sit on my ass and make the elf kids stride through the verdant plains of Hyrule is the reason I paid $60 goddamn for it.
No! Ganon hasn't attacked in weeks, and it's time you started earning your keep. There's chores to be done.
Now, you know, it does immerse me, though. Pull me in, get me more deeply invested, emotionally involved, connected to the characters in the world to the point where I care about what's happening, maybe even lose myself a bit in the action, because I've got a direct back and forth sensory thing happening with doing the thing and the reason I'm doing the thing.
The pixel shading bump mapping? She kicks eye.
A good story. Good characters, compelling characters. Doesn't necessarily need to be some deep or overly complex shit. There's a whole spectrum of happy mediums between hey monkey, hands off the girl, and whatever the hell was eventually going on in Metal Gear. If immersion is the goal, a solid setup related in engaging, compelling fashion will do the trick better than a lot of pretentious meta-psychological flashiness. Hell, I can still remember forcing myself through the impossible first Ninja Gaiden because I was invested in how the story would come out, and that story was just 80s anime boilerplate bullshit. And I promise you, no one is on pins for Squeenix to finish the Final Fantasy VII remake because they're just that eager to relive the circa 1997 Squaresoft menu system. Look, design however you want. I respect game design as an art form. I wouldn't tell David Lynch he wasn't allowed to not have chapter stops on the Mulholland Drive DVD because he thought letting people jump to the sex scene cheapened the narrative. I'm not going to tell you that you can't relay the plot to me by making me find a bunch of audio logs or do sliding puzzles or run voiceovers while I'm walking down an overly narrow hallway with the walking speed artificially slowed down or whatever, but I will tell you that I'm always going to be more annoyed than immersed, and the whole time I'm mostly going to be wishing that we could just go back to stopping the goddamn game for a minute, playing the cutscene that tells me what my next mission is so we can get back to the fun f***ing part of the game. Just a thought. Okay, checking my topic list for this week, and wow, okay, so we just did a politics episode, I thought, and the tie-in here is a little broad, but I'll give it my best shot. So yeah. Tifa. Though popularly known in the 21st century as the general self-adopted name of multiple semi-connected groups emerging in response to the rise of nationalist and/or nativist movements throughout the United States and Western Europe, whose social media-savvy organizing tactics and DIY guerrilla aesthetic has been extremely influential on character, weapon, and gear design in modern gaming franchises as diverse as Call of Duty, Fortnite, Watch Dogs, and a slew of independent titles. The name and concept of organized militant anti-fascism owes its origins to the Antifasciste Action offshoot of pre-World War II German Communist Workers' Party. Now, though this original iteration did not survive the war against Nazism itself, post-war anti-fascist organizing continued in many forms before the popular readoption of the name arrived in tandem against the renewed presence of white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and skinhead movements in the 80s and 90s. Sorry? Oh, Tifa! Oh, okay. Oh, all right then. I mean, okay, fine. Do I even want to know what the issue is with Tifa? I mean, obviously it must have to do with the remake of Final Fantasy VII, and certainly there's just tons to talk about there in terms of expectation, adaptation, the fact that she's such a terrific multidimensional female character in a franchise that wasn't always known for always doing, particularly in a title from the 90s. Are you really fucking kidding me? Seriously? Really? We're really still doing this, huh? One of the most transformative games of all time, generation-defining and genre-redefining classic, long-anticipated remake that to this point appears to have morphed into something like an entirely new game, or several entirely new games, potentially coalescing into a kind of living, breathing thesis statement on the futility yet fascination with recapturing not even nostalgia for things that were, but the sense of things that never actually were. And the big discussion we're going to have is, hey, wait a minute, Tifa had really huge boobs in the original game and in the drawings, but now in the remake they look a little less huge because they redesigned the characters to look a little more like physically real humans, so she's wearing a sports bra and they don't stick out and bounce around so much, and my penis is sad. So, like, literally the dumbest thing we could talk about. Great, that's just great. I mean, I can do it, sure, fine. I mean, fellas, also, presumably some women, I guess, maybe. Do you know how a sports bra works? I mean, what its purpose is, or even, like, activewear in general, just any clothing that someone whose job is to run around kickboxing Shinra guys and monsters and shit might actually wear while doing so, because based on this being a complaint, it seems like maybe you don't. So just so we're clear, if you know an actual woman who still has this figure while wearing one, go get yourself an engagement ring and a nicer apartment, job, and car. Because no, I do not in fact think this counts as me being part of the problem also. Well, it's a ridiculous discussion to begin with, so I don't... Okay, yeah, so I'm a little frustrated also. Sure, I should clarify this isn't like an anti-sexy character thing or a kink-shaming thing or whatever, but aren't you frustrated also? I mean, does it not bother you that not only is it 22 years since Final Fantasy VII, and not only are we still talking about Tifa's breasts, but no one is actually surprised that we're still talking about Tifa's breasts? Like, even forget the actual merits of the discussion for a moment. Is it not just a little bit sad that we're still here? Look, despite, you know, the title of this show, I'm not someone who thinks that just because the Atari generation is now collecting Social Security, every bit of games discourse has to be some kind of pretentious treatise about narrative theory. And in fact, I could probably do a less angry-sounding episode than this on how the mistaken paradigm that a work has to be serious itself to be regarded as seriously is a huge reason why games writing and writing about games sucks so bad so often right now. But it's also true that some of our fixations here between this and the guys who whined about Mortal Kombat's female costumes the last time, or quote-unquote protests every time some anime porn game doesn't get a retail release in the US, can't help but make the whole thing look beyond childish, which is why we can't be surprised or all that upset about stuff like this. I mean, look at this, look at it. That's not a fake headline and pull quote or an Onion thing or a lead into a joke, that's a real thing from the Wall Street Journal. And we bring it on ourselves to a certain degree, and that's not even my full frustration. The full frustration is knowing that I can't, in fact, just ignore this, because true to form, gamer culture has come face to face with an actual compelling question of artistic and creative philosophy uniquely innate to the video games medium, and proceeds to not notice because it's literally too busy staring at big old titties. See, despite usual whinging about giving in to SJWs or whatever, it's fairly obvious that what's actually going on with this redesign cuts to the heart of what makes reimagining Final Fantasy VII such an unusual prospect, which is why I couldn't just ignore this particular dumb thing like I'd prefer to. The fact of it is, Tifa gets a realistically proportioned do-over for the same reason the other characters appear to have, because their models got rebuilt from the ground up with everything else to take advantage of modern hardware's ability to do just that. But what's interesting about it is that the change largely removes most of the stylistic collage and the abstraction of cartoon polygon characters moving around semi-static backgrounds that paradoxically helped unify the aesthetic tone of the original game by making the transition from quasi-cyberpunk future dystopia of the Midgar segment to the broader, more traditional Final Fantasy-esque world just outside a little bit less jarring. And so far, we haven't really seen what the Beyond Midgar part of the remake is going to look like, or how the most extreme high fantasy visuals, creatures, and characters will be reworked to go along with this new, more realistic approach. And I'd be willing to venture a guess that Square hasn't really nailed it down either, and that's why we're getting a whole game that's mostly only Midgar first, and the second part later on, working out how far to push the connective tissue between the futuristic Blade Runner meets Brazil meets City of Lost Children urban warfare, and the new agey high fantasy stuff where the reimagined style seems so heavily favor of the first first but not so much the second, that's an interesting concept to wrestle with. I mean, just figuring out how they're going to handle Red 13 alone is going to present some challenge in this contest, and it makes you wonder how much substance and style is going to have to change before it's an entirely different thing, at which point one has to ask if that's really what people wanted all along from this. Not to play the game again, but to re-experience their memory of it. But then which idealized memory are we talking about, given that so much of the late 90s 32-bit gaming moment was characterized by stylistic mashups like Final Fantasy VII, where the onus was to just get things to work on the hardware? You know, whose rose-tinted, edges-sanded off, glass-half-full, romanticized image of what Final Fantasy VII really was gets to win out between the people who mainly remember colorful Squeenix nonsense versus people for whom it was an angst-fueled romantic dystopian swashbuckler? Do you recall it as a relaxed JRPG grind-a-thon with nice cutscenes? Or does your memory distill the whole thing down to one big one-winged angel music video? You know, does the audience that wanted a better render of Tifa because she only really had the suggestion of displaying well-rounded, fully developed emotional complexity before really have the absolute moral and intellectual high ground above the audience that wanted that same better render of Tifa before because she only had the suggestion of displaying well-rounded, fully developed, big juice? Well, okay, yes, in that case they absolutely do have the higher, just all of the higher grounds. But the rest of it, yeah, there's a lot of nuance there. Actually, a very interesting and important discussion for the medium to have that we don't have nearly enough. Wouldn't it be great if, once in a while, we could get here without having to start over there? Just a thought. So if you hadn't heard, Resident Evil is getting turned into a TV series for Netflix, which means it'll either be a massively popular cultural phenomenon that wins piles of awards, or a completely unseen phantom product you only ever find out exists because the algorithm drops it into your autoplay when you run out of new BoJack Horseman episodes, the only two types of content on Netflix. Now, nobody seems to know whether or not this is happening along with or instead of the previously announced reboot of the Resident Evil movie franchise, now that the filmmakers behind that have moved on to a Monster Hunter movie because it's presumed to do very well in China, pretty much. You know, the Resident Evil movies are this weirdo outlier in the whole video game movie discussion where for some reason it's been forgotten that there actually has been at least one long-running, consistently successful, at the box office at least, game adaptation that lasted a pretty good stretch. I assume some of that is because the longer it went on, the less it actually had to do with the core Resident Evil storyline. But then again, the better Resident Evil games also tended to have as little to do as possible with the core Resident Evil storyline. So I don't know what to tell you beyond observing that I mark my development into a mature understanding of cross-media literacy to be when I went from hating the Resident Evil movies for diverging from the plot of the games to thinking, oh, thank God they didn't keep the plot from the games.
You let yourself be captured so you could lead your people to this base!
I have no idea what you're babbling about.
You don't fool me! I am Alfred Ashford, commander of this base.
Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower-level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
How dare you! The Ashford family is among the world's first and finest. My grandfather is one of the original founders of Umbrella, Inc.
Not that anyone is going to mistake the Resident Evil movies for being good. It's a series of mid-budget B-movie sci-fi horror action hybrids, mainly notable for carrying the specifically chintzy late 90s aesthetic thereof, several years past the point when the rest of the film industry had moved on. They're dumb, they're fun, they average out pretty solid overall for what they are, and while this is probably still heresy for some reason, I'm sorry, being faithful to the games probably wouldn't have made them any better. Like, on a narrative level, the Resident Evil movies are stupid, but the Resident Evil games, again, on a narrative level, are stupid, but also convoluted, bloated, pretentious, and at least that one time weirdly racist. I mean, look, Resident Evil's place as a landmark gaming franchise can't be denied, but they weren't putting down stakes based on how rich and interesting a scenario they could communicate. The big innovation with Resident Evil was, whoa, graphics are finally good enough to make gross, scary monsters, so let's do that. Okay, so what's in there with the monsters? I don't know, maybe cops, I guess, and I guess a bunch of incomprehensible anime bullshit also. Now, the main knock against the Resident Evil movies from fans of the games tends to be that instead of focusing on the cheesy, one-dimensional protagonist from the series, the films instead followed a new cheesy, one-dimensional protagonist called Alice, played by actress Milla Jovovich, the wife of longtime Resident Evil producer and sometime writer-director Paul W.S. Anderson, seen here winning at life, pretty much. You know, he also did the first Mortal Kombat and Event Horizon. This guy's alright. I mean, if nothing else, Alice is a fun present in the Resident Evil movies, and not only because it's eventually clear we're just watching a fun couple put on a big silly cyberpunk burlesque fashion shoot and write it off as work every couple of years. Jovovich has always been an interesting action star. She's sort of the B-movie Angelina Jolie in a lot of ways, and it's kind of amusing seeing Alice kind of god mode her way through the franchise, getting and losing different powers, weapons, and abilities, changing sides, adding to her weird backstory. It often makes the movies feel more classically video gamey than the actual video games, especially in the weird moments where they remind you that the goofy-ass plot of the games is still sort of supposed to have been going on somewhere off to the side this whole time.
Chris and Claire Redfield, you've really become quite an inconvenience for me.
I told you I'd be bringing a few friends.
You should have brought more.
Yeah, that was weird. Thinking on it, I've never been one of these people who thinks there's some secret special trick required to make video game adaptations work, or that there's some unique quality to the medium that makes games harder to adapt than anything else. If you can make a good Lego movie, you can make a good anything movie. But since movies generally tend to have a story and a lot of game narratives are either bad, thin, or non-existent sometimes, an adaptation has to get creative about how you do it. And while I doubt there was that much meta thinking going into creating Alice for Resident Evil beyond let's get a somewhat simple, workable character into this thing who's not all bound up in the dumb nonsense mythology and just have them shoot the zombies. If for some reason that last sequel had decided to reveal that we've been watching some gamers' modded player characters zip through the games, it probably would have felt a lot more clever than it had any right to. Not saying that kind of thing is the solution, but having suffered through dreary-ass slogs like Assassin's Creed or that last Tomb Raider movie, which, admit it, you forgot that even happened, you have to wonder. Or at least I do. Just a thought. What? No, I'm not doing a show about the Overwatch dude being gay. I mean, good for him, but I'm not doing a show about it. Well, firstly, because I've got a lot of modern gaming to catch up on, and I'm still not 100% clear on what Overwatch even actually is, apart from like Team Fortress, but with a superhero kind of Incredibles Watchmen scenario going on, and every character looks like they're from something else, but processed through some kind of anime, pop art, Instagram filter. I mean, exactly why is this a big deal? Yes, I'm aware because video games, but still, I mean, like literally every single Overwatch thing I've ever experienced has had an overriding aesthetic and total sensibility that can best be summed up as Blade Runner as an upscale Los Feliz High School's inclusivity-minded prom theme. So it just feels weird to me that there'd be that many rabid homophobes skulking around this particular fan base. But mostly because anything related to Blizzard is still inevitably wrapped up in the fallout from the nonsense around the other Overwatch scandal with the player that may or may not exist, and that whole Diablo Immortal fallout, which is just exhausting to me. Not because my particular take on it was disagreed with by some. If it wasn't for backlash, it wouldn't be worth doing this show, honestly, but because it's just one version of an intractable argument that's been unwinnable, really unhavable, for about as long as gaming has been sentient of the expectation to care about these things, where it's a losing prospect to even attempt offering a take that isn't some variation on
This is
gaming.
And we are not afraid!
Basically, every unpopular decision backlash scandal in video games follows the same infuriatingly predictable formula. Step 1. A corporation will decide to do something dumb and bad, motivated solely by desire for profit because they are a corporation. Step 2. The dumb and bad decision made for profit will then be announced by a developer and/or celebrity with nerd cred and framed as an awesome, not bad thing for making happiness and not only profit. No, never. Usually it's some big dumb spectacle designed specifically for the joint purpose of increasing profits while obscuring the first part of that purpose. Step 3. Internet games culture processes this announcement.
Step 4. Having never meaningfully
concept of gamer identity from the marketing-created construct it originated as far back as the 1990s. Internet games culture predictably short-circuits in attempting to grapple with disgust at profit-driven capitalist corporatism without meaningfully grappling with their own complicity and gamer identity itself being inextricably part of that same corporatism, crumpling into a defeated psychological heap with unspent anger instead spewing haphazardly at more vulnerable, convenient targets.
Ahem. Step 5. Because the internet is an asshole magnification machine, any reasonable response one way or the other is drowned out immediately by the worst possible nastiest takes raining down not on the appropriate target, i.e. the system, the fact that gaming is a business heavily corporatized, and thus bad profit-driven decisions will happen and attaching your entire self-identity to such things will hurt you, but rather on the acceptable punching bag of the moment. Maybe one developer, one presenter, one company, some nebulous idea of an impure influence infiltrating the medium, whatever. Step 6. Games journalism reports on this. Step 7. Everyone is wrong and so is everyone else. If a games journalist says anything close to, yeah, well, that does seem like kind of a shitty thing to have announced, they are immediately accused of having signed on to support all the worst people and opinions in gaming. Yes, even those guys and that thing. Whereas the journalist who alternately offers that perhaps the previously identified acceptable punching bag of the moment does not deserve summary execution via Wicker Man in the parking lot of the next PAX will be met with the immediate scoffing of, hey, why are you defending millionaires and corporations from consumer criticism like they're the ones being picked on, Mr. Scarlet Pimpernel? Step 8. And now it just descends into a cluster of verbal sideways punching as we fight and argue and name call and hem and haw about how well point taken, but on the other hand, rich people always bad, consumer always good is a pretty immature praxis, and does not the consumer rights framing only serve to further the machinery of consumption and exploitation while only looking like a populist stand? But never mind, because we've all got to settle up, all creators versus consumers versus journalists versus other journalists, and whose side are you on, and which side will Spider-Man be on, and oh hey, didn't anyone notice the bad guys getting away? You know, because they did, and they pretty much always do. Both the top-tier corporate scumbags and the shitty games industry system that sustains them figured out a long time ago how to ensure that not only does the backlash to poorly received ideas and or outright bad actions never reach back any further than whatever sacrificial lamb got shoved out in front with them by constantly reinforcing this played-out Randian culty BS where it's always individual devs, creators, presenters, celebrities, journos, whatever, who need pulling down, and not this whole stupid incarnation of games culture itself. But thanks to the corporate cultivated gamer identity stranglehold on our psyche, we end up factionalizing and having this fight among ourselves, which also ends up muddying and obscuring real substantive areas of debate and disagreement within fandom about important stuff we should be having instead, rather than directing our displeasure at or trying to affect change in the area it's really needed, i.e. the system. And that's not to say we shouldn't have passionate reactions and arguments about things that happen or are planned to happen in gaming. Theoretically, developers, publishers, players, creators are all in this because we're passionate about games, but when we get sucked into these cycles and this specific stupid feedback loop again and again and again, I mean, it's still about a game, but we're the ones getting played. Just a thought. Okay, just so we're all on the same page here, this is the regular weekly version of the Game OverThinker. You've probably seen a bunch of other Overthinker videos popping up all over the site this week because we've also been running reaction pieces to big release news and game company press events for E3. But now for your normal Overthinker programming, we're dipping into... wait, what are we doing? Well, that actually sounds like more of the same thing, actually. No, I mean, I do it, it seems like we might be spreading a little... So what this comes down to is we've been mostly reacting to trailers and new games, with this being an off year without any major showstopper to dominate the conversation and big next generation hardware reveal, evidently on hold for the next one. There hasn't really been anything major for gamers to universally thrill to, but since we are talking about video games, there's plenty for people to get way too idiosyncratically enraged by. And this year, a popular target of disdain has been the evergreen issue of studios holding press events revealing new and upcoming games with trailers that contain little to no actual gameplay, comprised either of a arranged cutscenes, or in some cases expensively animated sequences that will only ever exist as short-form features used to advertise early builds of the game in this specific context. And even trailers and reveals that do feature actual gameplay often do so in sporadic bursts or as part of montages that reduce them to abstract elements of light and sound rather than representations of their actual selves. Now, of course, it's obvious why some companies would want to present their games this way, especially now that a portion of the public and quote-unquote fandom prosumer press is invited to the show. E3 press events are about generating hype and making a splash, and what amounts to an animated short film can make even a mediocre actual game seem worthwhile. Likewise, it's easy to see why this would be frustrating for people trying to glean actual information from these presentations. What amounts to an animated short film can make even a mediocre actual game look worthwhile. And yet, while I could be a smug, cynical asshole about this and point out that getting mad about a trade show for expensive technology toys, leaning harder into spectacle than substance, is probably at least a little bit about not wanting to be reminded so readily that you are essentially clapping and cheering for a billion-dollar corporation affording you the privilege of watching commercials, I would perhaps instead... Oh? Oh yeah, right. I guess I did do that. Here's the thing, though. In theory, I don't actually really mind this. First of all, in practical terms, a lot of these games aren't anywhere near close to done, and you don't want to show the underwhelming skeleton of a project or something you don't end up getting to finish. Secondly, a lot of games in the past that have shown gameplay turned out to be just as non-representative, if not more so, because the studios were creating these slick-looking vertical slices of seemingly good gameplay of what turned out to be shit overall titles. So speaking only for myself, but I'm not so much sick of cinematic game trailers as I am sick of bad, boring cinematic game trailers. And if this stuff came off entertaining and less samey and repetitive, I sincerely suspect there'd be a lot less complaining about it. Not that I haven't learned to somewhat ironically appreciate our yearly parade of dev studio animators and cutscene editors busting out the melancholy college music and visual nods to Meshes of the Afternoon, Un Chat Andalou, and the finale of Zabriskie Point to gussy up the latest shooty gun bang army war title as a way of saying, look, even though I do this for a living, I did go to film school. Thusly, what I'm given to wonder is whether or not the real deep down source of resentment here isn't about the gameplay-free trailers themselves at all, but what they reveal about the sorry state of what they're trying to sell. After all, gameplay is only one element of a game. A quote-unquote cinematic trailer should theoretically have plenty else to work with, like focusing on things such as story, theme, characters, idea, atmosphere, the chance to tell us why we want to interact with these interactive worlds, yes? Well, sure, unless, of course, the characters are flat to non-existent, or the worlds are bland and generic, or the stories have been retread a dozen times this same year alone, or the themes are muddled, confused, or lacking in depth. Just as the general spectacle of these presentations can sour an audience simply by reminding them too sharply that E3 is a giant monument to conspicuous consumption and little else, the endless deluge of bland, run-together cinematic trailers forces gamers to confront just how narratively malnutritious, bereft of decent characters, and lacking in meaningful resonant themes so much of modern gaming really is now. But what really eats at us, I suspect, is that this sorry spectacle isn't only a window on an industry shambling toward its next crash and creative meltdown. It's also a mirror. Just a thought. A few things are guaranteed to get me excited, like any announcement having anything to do with Dragon Quest. Doesn't matter if it's a re-release, a brand new game,
right,
a Dynasty Warriors type thing, a new movie, or putting one of the legacy characters into Smash Brothers. Really? Still nothing? Come on, guys. Point is, I am always ride or die when it comes to Dragon Quest. I have been ever since I got my first one for free from Nintendo Power. And I will be for a long time, even though it's been at least a decade since I had the free time to actually finish one. It's one of my pure gaming happy place zones. As far as I'm concerned, the quintessential just right JRPG experience between Monster Hunter's relentless grind for grind's sake and Final Fantasy's head up its own ass melodramatic narrative fixations. So obviously I am psyched for Dragon Quest Walk. a new mobile title that aims to combine Dragon Quest classic aesthetic with Pokemon Go's well, just Pokemon Go, pretty much. Not just because I like Dragon Quest, but because I, yes, still sincerely, enjoy the casual novelty of Pokemon Go, and I say that as someone who mostly missed the Pokemon phenomenon the first time around in the actual games. Now, to be honest, Dragon Quest seems like an even more natural fit for the mobile augmented reality map-exploring genre than Pokemon Go ever was right off the bat. Yes, Go was successful and remains so, but it also faced early criticism for not having battles and other major focus elements of the franchise ready at launch, and instead being more of a treasure hunting and exploration game with some monster fighting than a Pokemon-centric experience. A JRPG like Dragon Quest, on the other hand, which generally features treasure hunting and exploring as main features apart from grinding, feels like a more natural fit. Plus it'll have slimes! Don't you like slimes? In all seriousness, augmented reality, or AR games, increasingly feel poised to be to the 4 and 5G mobile gaming era what the post-Super Mario Bros. Side-scroller was to home consoles in the 80s, the perfectly suited killer app of a genre that no one really saw coming, but turned out to be exactly what the medium was looking for in that moment. In this case, games that have both an active and passive mode of engaged play, effectively creating IP-themed, gamified versions of smartphone and tablets' primary day-to-day functions for most people, looking at maps, organizing files, taking photos, and managing their social media. Now, as is often the case with mobile phenomenons, mainstream gaming is often quick to peg this kind of thing as having strictly vertical appeal, a big individual audience but not much room to expand outward. And Pokemon owes a bit of its inspiration in the first place to the monster capture mechanic introduced at one point in that franchise. The Minecraft AR title is a given because Minecraft is also map-oriented and ditto Mario Kart, but realistically, how many different variations on a concept can a market support? Remember what happened with MMOs? But that assumes that reskinning Google Maps with a video game is the only type of experience AR this style can be used for, which is an extremely limiting view in my estimation. Imagine, for example, a version of SimCity that allowed you to start from an augment of your own actual geographic surroundings as a foundation, or a mobile spin-off of Assassin's Creed that gave you a map of your current location as it was known to be laid out in a different century. Now that would be trippy. There's also the very now and in-the-moment possibilities afforded to the mobile console and or PC gaming integration, as seen with Pokemon Let's Go's ability to interface with Go for some features. A beta concept now, certainly, but the potential entices. What about a game based around defined physical prowess of player character, like a sports title, a fighting game, combat sim, that kind of thing, having a corresponding mobile app encouraging players to get their steps in or perform some other worthy day-to-day exercise that would be translated as strength training to their character later on, or visiting certain locations like libraries or museums in reality afforded an intelligence stat boost in an RPG. I'm sure that mechanic does already exist somewhere, but it could be integrated further in this fashion. And remember, we're still very much in the early days of augmented reality technology. The holy grail of this stuff, being able to read and render 3D textures over and incorporate it into live-action video on the fly in order to generate actual versions of game things in real-life gags from the commercials for these titles, is still a ways off, but it's closer than ever. And once it gets here, just imagine the kind of experiences we'll be able to create. You could, for example, do a Silent Hill game where you hold up your phone and tablet and look through the screen, and suddenly the whole world looks all Silent Hillized, and you can look around for clues and avoid the zombies and monsters and pyramid heads and creatures. Fog. Constant sense of eyes watching you unseen from the grim hopelessness of the abyssal plain, yawning open to swallow your last shred of humanity. Okay, maybe not that one. So the last few episodes have been a little on the negative side, right? Focused on things that are not so great in the world of video games. And there's room for that, sure. A lot of problems worth covering, but there's also good stuff, and maybe it doesn't always get the right attention, partly because so much of the commentary and the problems being commented on have been coming from older grumpy guys confused by change like, well, me. So this week, sincerely, 5 whole things that are just honestly great about the new and current world of video games right the hell now. Alright, so there's sort of a meme that I'm in a small part probably responsible for helping spread, that gaming used to feel a lot more diverse than it does now because of how weird and random and sure, throw that against the wall and see if it sticks, premises and characters were in the arcade and early console era. And the fact is that feeling really is different than the reality. It's true that the mainstream face of big public well-known AAA gaming has gotten streamlined and homogenized a lot as the hobby has become more expensive and established. When the big guns roll out E3 presentations, there's kind of a similar vibe that runs through things. You don't see so much of, here's an army game and a block puzzle and a platformer from Japan about a snail and a baseball game and a fishing sim like you used to back in the 80s and 90s when they were just throwing whatever they had out there. But the fact is, just because the discussion space of mainstream games culture isn't as idiosyncratic as it was before, isn't indicative of the entire scene. There's a lot of interesting, unusual stuff that simply doesn't get the same kind of coverage because game media has actual metrics now, for good or ill. The fact is, there's probably never been a point in time when there's been this many new games or ways to affordably access an increasing number of vintage games in this wide of a variety. You just have to, dig for it. And you can. Look, while I have a lot of issues with the move away from physical media in general, the rise of digital distribution does mean that there's never been more variety or ease of access, whether you're talking semi-obscure limited release titles, the unprecedented bonanza of independent games, and the stunning stuff that's beginning to happen in terms of retro and classic curation. I mean, did you get a load of that SNK 40th anniversary set where you can, start playing from any point in a pre-recorded playthrough? It's the balls incredible collection. All 3 major consoles have some level of an online store. Almost every ubiquitous handheld device, and increasingly most other devices that can play any kind of media, have some sort of game availability in it, and also have some sort of store or application center of some kind for that, and it's been nearly the norm for a whole generation of technology. Now, there's absolutely a corresponding argument to be had about how this is affected by a class divide in many regions around disparity of internet speed availability, and that's probably going to get worse thanks to the loss of net neutrality, but at least in foundational theory, the availability of games themselves is a fact. Some people will always insist on seeing this as a problem. As far as I'm concerned, though, as nostalgic as some may be for the secret underground club atmosphere of 80s and 90s gaming, on the whole, gamers are a lot better off now that the hobby is an 8 to 80 pastime. Never mind that it's just nice that so many people can share a widely applicable common interest, but even if your gaming focus is narrowly self-interested in hardcore gaming and your own access there too, one of the reasons, for example, that dumb controversies associating games with real-world violence and threats thereto has been relegated to a relic of the reactionary past is that a mainstream culture isn't as panicked by something it actually has experience with and actively participates in. Plus, it's just, nice. Don't believe me? Watch how many people get all sad when Nintendo inevitably does a mini version of the Wii in a couple years because the big thing they remember is their grandparents really liked Wii Sports back when. Some of you are tearing up right now because you hadn't thought of that before, I can already tell. Man, when I was coming up, video games seemed like even more magic than movies or TV in terms of how these things even get made to happen. And even once you had kind of an idea of how programming and graphics worked out, it seemed damn near impossible that you'd even be actually making one unless you went to school for it, and back then there really weren't any of those around that anyone had heard of, because the resources weren't exactly out there, and those that were very basic or very arcane. But today, not only do many of the biggest games come with some sort of mess around in the sandbox and make something mechanic as an expected feature, there's just so many products and websites and programs and books and just, toys for very young kids dedicated to introducing the basics of actual game design. And that's nothing to say of whole games built around it, like the Little Big Planet franchise or Super Mario Maker. And when you combine how much more open and available the tools of game creation are becoming, with how much more varied and diverse the makeup and perspective of gamers themselves are becoming, with the increased breadth of access in general, put all that together and not only does the present look better than it generally gets credit for, the future, for this narrow thing at least, actually looks pretty decent. Hell yeah, I can! It's my show. One of them can be just for me. I think it's a good look. Never mind what it cost. Hey there again, this is the Game Overthinker with another big E3 reaction coming at you. The big Xbox event just wrapped up, and that was certainly something. We saw hardware, we saw software, we saw the future, we saw the past, we saw a game company take the stage and boldly tell us, please tell us what you want us to be. Look, it's always been tough going for Xbox when it came to establishing an identity in gaming, because when Microsoft first joined the party, they didn't really need to. They were the console that wasn't Japanese and was thus married more directly to the legacy of PC shooters, sims, and sports gaming in the West than Sony or Nintendo's consoles and arcade legacy. But in 2019, that identity is just kind of gaming now as far as the big money markets are concerned. So what exactly is the Xbox brand other than PlayStation but chunky and green instead of svelte and blue, and Phil Spencer instead of movie stars roped in from our still sort of existent film studio?
This moment isn't just about finding some new games, it's about discovering your new games.
This is relevant to my purchasing sensibilities. What even is the Xbox now? Judging by their E3 2019 presentation, Microsoft's answer is, you tell us, as in, no really, please tell us what we should be focusing on, because this industry is in upheaval and we have no idea where we're supposed to land next. Where prior years' unveilings have held to a sense of narrative coherency vis-a-vis how and when each new title and or piece of news was unveiled in kind of a natural, organic flow of titles, 2019's show hit audiences with a deluge of reveal trailers with little to no connective tissue between each one. Twee indie mood pieces followed blunt force shooters, zombie survival sequels tumbled out after long-awaited retro revivals, and the only thing resembling a planned arc was that they definitely meant to end with a tech-heavy spec tease of the next Xbox codenamed Project Scarlet and a new Halo, which definitely looked like a new Halo.
We need to run! No, we need to fight.
What were you expecting exactly?
There was so little sense of theme going on that they managed to drop two absolutely huge international global phenomenons come to the States reveal trailers with almost no explanation as to what they were, who they were for, or why it should matter to anyone who didn't already know. Phantasy Star Online 2 at least got some cursory, hey, remember Sega action? But Crossfire X, the US debut of a 12 years running free-to-play military FPS that's the most massively popular game of its genre ever across Asia, 80 countries already playing, 650 million registered accounts. This game was the reason Activision made Call of Duty Online in the first place to compete, got a cinematic trailer that didn't even tell you what genre of game it was or why you might want to find out besides, hey, more guns. In fact, if there was a subtitle for this entire presentation, it may well have been, Xbox, trust us, somewhere, someone is excited about this. You had a Blair Witch trailer right the hell up front, which is great placement for a franchise with one briefly trendy movie from 20 years ago whose follow-ups everyone hated, that's been a punchline ever since, and whose reboot nobody really cared about. And then the trailer for Outer Worlds opening with the most cliche-packed, portentous game narration that didn't turn out to be a parody perhaps ever recorded.
Proudly owned and operated by corporations. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to them. No one has ever gone against them. A stranger has just arrived. Someone who's challenging the corporate board.
No! We'll never defeat the corporation! They've won!
Also establishing the other thing that was as close as we were going to get to a running theme, trailers showing very little gameplay, but also not much in the way of establishing who these hypothetically engaging enough on their own characters and worlds are via cutscene. Like somewhere we took a hard right turn and your biggest source for short-form, non-linear, abstract, cinematic, mood piece short subjects is now E3, apparently. I mean, you gotta love the disconnect for how the Gears of War games are increasingly marketed to a caricature of the gaming press. Check out our cool, non-traditional female protagonist coping with trauma character arcs, moody art house trailers, and coffeehouse needle drop soundtracks, but the games are still, you know, just Gears of War. Then again, I did dig the hell out of this Cyberpunk 2077 aesthetic, where it's the future, but only if certain technology had accelerated really, really fast circa 1986, but fashion and decorating sensibilities had not done so at all. I mean, I get it, I love Blade Runner as well, but it's kind of funny how the now anachronistic Cyberpunk 80s future aesthetic was meant to imagine a crappy version of basically right now, but I'd 100% take this world over our actually crappy right now. Like, that guy's got a golden robot arm, all we've got is Elon Musk and his stupid tunnel. Anyway, it turns out they could afford video game Keanu Reeves for this one, and the actual Keanu Reeves for the show. How about that? John Wick himself comes out to work the crowd and tease a way the hell next year release date with the same energy of a youth pastor doing an awkwardly pop culture-laden anti-drug lecture.
Cyberpunk is set in a metropolis of the future, where body modification has become an obsession. You play as an outlaw, an enhanced mercenary working in the sleazy underbelly of the city. Yeah. Okay, but let me tell you.
But hey, we all still love Earth's Greatest Humans, so he gets a pass on this one. It's okay, Keanu, E3 makes everyone look ridiculous, and also I'm still looking forward to this game. Case in point, they kept building up the reveal for Game Pass Ultimate Cloud Gaming thing. Yeah, because that's something I'm confident Microsoft is going to get right on the first try.
I don't like the look of that.
With this self-important metaphor about scouring the world to bring you the best games.
This is why we scour the world for your next new games.
My team travels the globe, seeking out fan favorites and hidden gems, and crafts partnerships with their creators.
That really sounded like any minute we were going to cut to some B-roll of Phil Spencer skulking through some seedy bazaar in like Marrakesh, one hand on the holster of his pearl-handled revolver, sampling a taste of rare exotic indie content on the tip of his Bowie knife like, and you sure your master can get me more of this? Look, I gotta entertain myself somehow, folks. They showed us a controller commercial. Remember back when luxury car ads, but for things that are not luxury cars, was a joke?
Hey, they're doing that ball bearing thing.
Oh, hey, look, a Gearbox game. Trying to think of a joke that won't potentially turn out to be tragically prophetic at some point. There
are 6 sirens in the universe. I used to be one of them. My name is Lilith. And I need you.
Okay, so I know this series is tongue-in-cheek, but Lilith, Sirens, and the number 7 all in one self-expository sentence is basically just dialogue by throwing darts blind at Bullfinch's mythology, right? The 23 horsemen of the Upanishads will be loosed by the first blow of Galadriel's ocarina, lest the alabaster toe ring of Count Solomon be flushed from the crystal talons of Pallas Chocobo. Oh, and speaking of which, George R.R. Martin and the Dark Souls people apparently did a game together, so yay, there's a whole new bunch of guys to blame for that book not coming out yet. But if it sounds like I'm being perhaps overly negative, there was one part I absolutely loved, that Forza Horizon trailer.
Geez, video games, you must think I'm one easy lay for exactly that kind of thing, and you'd be damn right.
Perfect. Masterful trolling, great payoff, actually looks fun to play, makes sense with the franchise, and unlike all the other stuff shown on these lines, like, hey, you can be the Terminator in Gears of War because that makes sense, or Minecraft, but we're just gonna reskin other games now because we like money, or Gears of War with Funko Pops, because wow, if that ain't the light mayonnaise on Wonder Bread of aggro-aesthetic mashups.
Hooray! Products!
Granted, it doesn't really say anything great that, psych, it's Lego, we put Lego in it, was the unironic highlight of a presentation for me, but you can't really put this on Microsoft or Team Xbox. They're a company looking for an industry center to be the reliable powerhouse consensus choice of, and nobody knows what that is because everyone knows either the cloud, nigh inevitable economic downturn, or ecological calamity is going to completely flip the table in the near future and everything is going to change, but into what? If you were in that situation, you'd also probably be on stage looking sweaty and panicked going, what do you want? Whatever you want, we'll do it. Just tell us. You want Battletoads? Here's Battletoads. Ask your dad. They were almost a thing once. Really, the ads in Nintendo Power had everyone very excited until they couldn't get past that part with the hoverbikes.
Alright gang, this is not a drill. We have seen Jedi Fallen Order's first gameplay footage from E3 and the Game OverThinker is here with my reactions. Is this it? Do we finally have another great Star Wars game? And if we do, will Star Wars fans nonetheless find something else to whine about anyway?
The new footage debuted for E3 gave us a much better look at new hero Cal Kestis, a Padawan survivor of Order 66 as he fights to survive and, you know, just kind of keep the universe jogging in place, I guess, until Luke grows up. Yeah, it is kind of weird how increasingly common it is in just Star Wars lore now that there were just tons of random Jedi Force users still ambling around between episodes 3 and 4 and they didn't really accomplish that much, I guess. Kind of weird to find out the Stormtroopers also had those anti-lightsaber weapons all the way back at this point already too.
Well, I guess that's just always what?
That raises some tactical questions, but then again, if anyone in the Empire was ever good at anything besides Darth Vader, the series wouldn't have multiple episodes. So yeah, we get to see some combat, lots of abilities get used, and check out the big production budget on us cameo action from Saw Gerrera, so yeah. Anyway, it looks okay, I guess. Pretty cool, nice environments, familiar Star Wars toys to play with.
Hooray! Products!
New music and designs all feel authentic without just feeling like assets we've seen before dropped in, mostly. Looks to be a lot of variety in the combat between the saber fighting, hand-to-hand force powers, some bullet time business that looks sharply cribbed from the takedown moves in the Arkham games and the last Spider-Man game. I'd have liked to see more of what your little droid partner can do, but that seems like it's going to provide a little bit of variety.
I like that because it's familiar to me.
I mean, let's get real about this. The basic demand from fans has basically been give us a next-gen single-player Jedi action game, and if what looks to be a semi-standard, mostly linear, clear the level, kill the bad guys game with Star Wars dressing, where you at least get to swing a lightsaber around. I mean, we haven't really had one of those since Force Unleashed 2 and haven't had a good one in longer than that, so a good-looking version of Swordplay Action Game 101 with Star Wars stuff in it, if that's really all anyone was requiring them to deliver here, and from this limited vantage point, it looks like that may have hit the mark, I guess that's what this is. Look, it can't be easy trying to thread the new and exciting versus recognizable brand, and Star Wars fans especially have proven especially harsh when it comes to change, so maybe being almost underwhelmingly exactly what you'd expect it to be is entirely the point of this.
Pretty.
So consider my mind decidedly not blown by any of this, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it, at least from a watching standpoint. We'll find out how the hands-on goes soon enough, I'm sure. But anyone waiting to see something like this take the license and go as different and exciting as KOTOR did back in the day is probably going to have to keep waiting. The franchise has a hole to dig itself out of on the game side to win back favor. That means playing a little bit safe, and safe means a generic-looking protagonist doing standard missions with pretty graphics. Are you new here? And hey, there's nothing that says you can't get a winner out of doing exactly what you expect in a game, if and when you deliver really good final product. Did they pull it off? Well, it's EA, so I guess we'll find out.
Well, that was a thing. Underwhelming, maybe, confusing, unclear, hard to disagree, and yet, what were we expecting other than to be told this was a thing that we were already told was going to exist, and it still is on track to exist? Man, it's amazing this business is still a business. Look, if you needed more proof beyond the only actually commercially and creatively successful modern films based on video games being adaptations of a franchise from the 90s and another from the 80s, that while the aesthetics of video games have never been more influential on the broader media, gaming narrative as an extension of the same has never mattered less, you need only consider that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been the biggest pop cultural force on the planet Earth for a solid decade now, and yet for most of that decade they've barely even bothered to attempt to have a meaningful gaming presence apart from letting their characters fight Capcom's back catalog every couple of years. But that was supposed to change now with Square Enix, Crystal Dynamics, and Marvel Games teaming up to do a big budget online co-op action game based on the Avengers, which was teased last year and now just showed off its first full trailer at Square Enix's big E3 showcase. And let me just say, trailer itself aside, you gotta give big propers to Square for knowing that their audience at the auditorium and around the world was going to be packed with impatient mainstream entertainment journalists who otherwise never covered games and wouldn't know Final Fantasy from Adam, obliged to watch only to report on this one Marvel-related item, because this is the only way any of us make money anymore, and they still went and stuck it at the very end of the program, forcing all of those poor confused souls to endure an hour of incomprehensible JRPG anime bullshit just to get there. Yeah, you want to tell people if Spider-Man is in this one or not? You're gonna watch 15 interchangeable ads about hyper-dramatic teenagers, sword fighting, and armored Rococo evening wear first. Respect.
If we had no crystals, miasma would consume us all. I believe in the luminary. You have to live.
You bastard!
Leonis, ruled by the Red Lion Monarch, possesses the power of visions, as well as twin princes.
Remember, you're the luminary. We believe in you.
But anyway, the Avengers trailer looks fine, I guess, for something they clearly aren't ready to show a lot of yet still, but had to show some of. You don't get much sense of a design aesthetic beyond kind of bland, giving the creators involved, and also they were never ever going to get the actor likeness rights from the Marvel movies. And they're obviously holding back a lot from the premise. What they are letting show is that your broad goal is to reassemble a decommissioned Avengers team in a Marvel universe where that whole project went a bit upside down because of a mission gone wrong, but not like Civil War or Avengers Disassembled from the comics, a completely different thing where that same business has happened. In this case, a mission has gone wrong and led to an accident that blew up part of San Francisco and supposedly killed off Captain America. I bet he comes back, though. The trailer itself, which claims to have been made with in-game captured footage, only showcased the likes of Captain America, Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, and Black Widow as significant characters to be controlled in the game, though it was stressed that a larger assortment of Marvel figures, good and bad, are coming. The only villain that really jumped out at me right away appeared to be a version of Taskmaster, for whatever that's worth, though weirdly the whole thing is narrated by an off-screen little girl who we never see see and who never identifies herself. However, the presentations after the trailer showed a slightly longer scene where the dangerous explosion on A-Day. Is that where we're really going with A-Day? Because that seems sort of bad. Hey, when did the bad thing happen? It was called A-Day. Yes, it definitely was A-Day. What day was it? Was it a Tuesday? A Monday? It's very late, folks. We're doing this late at night. Anyway, it was caused by experiments with a Terrigen crystal, i.e. the element that activates the dormant powers in the Inhumans, so it's probably a safe bet that the narrator girl is all but certainly going to turn out to be Miss Marvel, aka Kamala Khan, who everyone has just assumed was going to be a huge part of Marvel's next big multimedia phase going forward, so maybe that's where this begins. Still, for now, that's just a theory. Don't bet money on it and get mad at me if it's wrong. Beyond that, yeah, not really much to react to other than they finally got around to making an Avengers game. It doesn't look like anything special right now, but they're not doing loot boxes, so that's nice, huh? Time was they'd have to tease some fan favorite character that had never been in a game before, some major things from the comics, but maybe it's a testament to how long we've gone without one of these that, hey, this exists, guys, Avengers, huh? But hey, you tuned in for a reaction, and this is mine. Marvel's The Avengers. This is a thing that exists, or will at some point.
But don't you worry. A hero descends. What? There are no heroes in this world? Oh, but there totally are.
Game OverThinker here, back with another E3 reaction. The annual Nintendo Direct presentation just ended, and man, if Nintendo didn't show up and just Nintendo all over the damn place.
And now my favorite and also least favorite part of every E3, the big Nintendo presentation where I end up super excited about a ton of games and then immediately bummed out from wishing at least one of the other big companies would show even a third of this variety or commitment to the legacy of gaming so it wouldn't seem as much like I'm unnecessarily devoted to the machinations of one corporate entity. I honestly don't feel like a Nintendo fanboy at this point any more than I feel like a fanboy for Oxygen or Protein. They're the only ones making the stuff I need to keep going.
Hooray! Products!
Look, if you need to understand how my mind works when it comes to video games, the Nintendo Direct won E3 for me, and it didn't even need to do it with a Nintendo game, it did it with a goddamn Konami game. A new Contra, local multiplayer, and it looks good, recognizably like Contra, and you can play as a panda, and you're even gonna give me a whole collection of the originals too? Well, goddamn, why does anyone else even bother coming to the show?
No words. Should have sent a poet.
I mean, how am I supposed to be just okay when their toss-off opening is Dragon Quest Hero Guy and Smash Brothers, followed by, oh, sorry, is the guy from the new one not quite enough because he's not as entrenched in the cultural history of the series? Well, here's a bunch of the others who are.
I like that because it's familiar to me.
I mean, yeah, it would have been nice for them to include the alternate female skins where applicable, but still, that's a heck of an opening. And then at the end, they gave the rest of you that bear thing from that one N64 game that I promised you is not as good as you remember it being, but the system had stopped getting a ton of releases by that point, so yeah, sure, I played it too, and I'm glad people are excited about that, I guess.
I like things that are recognizable to me.
Kind of an interesting choice that they put that much production effort into a trailer for Resident Evil when all they're really announcing is that 5 and 6 are getting ported to Switch, like, hey, great, now you can complete your collection with the kinda racist one and the really bad one. Yay! But, you know, hey, it's not my money.
Here we go.
Elsewhere in the show, Link's Awakening looks more adorable than ever, if that's possible, and the new Animal Crossing looks promising. How can I not be excited for a full-on No More Heroes 3, even if it's a little weird that it didn't accompany an announcement for him coming to Smash Brothers? I mean, they can't leave him out now, can they? Can they?
Was today the 4th of July? If not, is the Empire striking back or what?
Haha! References.
And holy shit, is that a f***ing Dark Crystal video game? Whose kid did I pull out of a burning car to deserve this?
Whoa.
Was I disappointed at no new Mario outside Luigi's Mansion 3, no Metroid news of any kind, no Bayonetta 3, and only just another 2-brief trailer for Astral Chain? Sure, there are always going to be more of this stuff, but compared to the mixed bag at everyone else's show, I'd say it was quite the haul.
Hey everyone, Game OverThinker here on the last day of E3, and man, I am exhausted. Anyway, here's a top 5, because that's what you do at the end of one of these things.
We are making a new kind of action-adventure game. It's spooky.
Video game social media declaring undying love for anyone who can manage to show actual unforced enthusiasm in the dystopian arena of E3 presentation stage is nothing new, but this time the cycle paid out to someone long overdue for the credit. Ikumi Nakamura has been an underappreciated creative talent in Japanese gaming for years, a disciple of the legendary Shinji Mikami, whose own ascent has been unjustly derailed a few times before this, so seeing her become an instant sensation while debuting a game that also looks like an original winner in its own right was a real treat.
Thank you!
Am I one of those guys who says there's entirely too many anonymous interchangeable anime boys with swords in Smash Brothers? Yes, I am. Am I nonetheless psyched to play as Dragon Quest guys? You bet your ass I am. Does that make me a hypocrite? No, because everybody knows too many anime sword boys in Smash actually just mean I live outside the borders of Japan and therefore have never given a shit about anyone from Fire Emblem. Anyway, glad they're here. Now please add Gino, Mallow, Higgins, Ryu, Larry, and Bentley Bear. There's now a character in Luigi's Mansion 3 who's a clone of Luigi made of slime, and his name is Gooigi, and because it's a Mario game, everyone now has to say the word Gooigi and act like this is a completely rational and not at all completely insane series of design decisions, and if you can't love that, then why even video games? I don't know what this is, but I love it. It looks like an actual good 3D version of Contra. It's got great over-the-top character designs, including this panda.
Hungry Beast! HB is actually a cyborg. I love him so much.
I had no clue it was even coming out, so it's new to me, and man, do I hope it's as much fun as it looks. Plus, I'm informed by my associate, Mr. Agnello, that the director on this one was the lyricist for the theme song to Neo Contra, which was memorable.
And there you have it, my top 5 for E3 2019. Do you agree, disagree, just want to yell at me for not including Cyberpunk, Watch Dogs Brexit, or the bewildered-looking Hollywood actor of your choice? Please feel free to
suck my dick!
Two episodes back, we had some fun at the expense of the terrible-looking Sonic the Hedgehog live-action movie trailer, which managed the impressive feat of looking bad even compared to everything else that's been done with Sonic the Hedgehog between 1997 and now. Basically. Seriously, it's kind of amazing how long this property has lasted based on 3 undeniably decent games almost 30 years ago and like 2 good cartoons, I think?
To act too soon could seal their fate.
Only to learn soon after that everyone else had apparently had so much fun at the expense of that trailer that the studio's feelings got hurt, and now they're apparently going to change the weirdly awful looking design of the CGI Sonic model to some degree that maybe people will like better, because that's probably the place where most of the changes can be made at this point now that they've already, made the movie.
Oh, come on.
Now who knows what's actually going on here? Are they really bowing to fan pressure? Did they intentionally release a bad design so they could look good for fixing it later? Probably not. That's a lot of money to spend for a maybe, but who knows, I guess. Had there perhaps been long-standing differences of opinion on the production about what the final render should look like, and this gave one party over another something like a data point to go told you so with? Who knows? It's Hollywood. We still don't really know who killed the Black Dahlia, or what really happened with Fatty Arbuckle, or if my audience is getting these incredibly dated and unnecessarily dark Hollywood history references, yes. Anyway, what it boils down to is that now everyone working in effects on this movie will probably have to put in a bunch of unnecessary overtime hours they weren't planning on in order to fix something that probably should have been fixed before it got to the hard part on a compressed high-stress schedule. In other words, video game movies have now been infected with the most insidious workplace ailment in regular video games: crunch. AKA the baked-in, let's just assume having to nearly kill ourselves to make this game happen in the home stretch instead of just budgeting time realistically in the first place, bad management practice rampant in AAA game development for over a decade that's transformed the making-of story behind some of your favorite and least favorite games of the last few years into the Korean animation studio gag from the Clerks cartoon.
Korean animation studio! Everybody work! Everybody work! Everybody work! He big mean man whip us. We are slaves.
Now at this point, I don't even need to go down a list or even cite one particularly recent or infamous individual example. From Red Dead Redemption's 100-hour work weeks and Rockstar somehow thinking that they should brag about that, to Epic guilting its workers into foregoing weekends and time off for minor fixes, to Telltale literally grinding itself into extinction, to Riot jumping up like, man, we did all that shit too, and just wait till you hear about all the sexual harassment. And then we find out now that the same kind of stuff was going on at NetherRealm at Mortal Kombat, with over 100-hour days, pressure to overperform, and contractors getting underpaid, and also, evidently, they couldn't give any of those 100 extra hours to have Ronda Rousey do a second take on any of those line readings, because, wow, she's as bad at voice acting as she is at acting. Like, seriously, it's kinda weird to hire someone who's good at exactly one thing, and it's the thing you're gonna animate them doing instead of, like, having them actually do it.
You've been looking for me, Scarlet.
Anyway, crunch is often thought of largely in terms of a Western gaming problem, which is unfair and culturally biased, kind of, mainly because the same culture of overwork and masochistic supplication of self to company that Americans in particular at least know they're supposed to find somewhere between problematic and abhorrent is still largely woven into the collective psyche of Japanese workplace culture and software and otherwise. Just look at the way Nintendo fandom romanticizes Masahiro Sakurai's Sisyphean self-punishment in grinding out the Smash Bros. Series, and if you want to reassure yourself that it's not just a gaming problem in Japan and kick your nostalgia just right the fuck in the balls, go read some testimonials from people who've actually had to work under Hayao Miyazaki. Yeah. Man, it was great when we found out at least Mr. Rogers wasn't an asshole, right? But okay, if you don't understand why crunch and gaming's one-time romantic tech dev as gladiatorial combat and or actual warfare idealization thereof is bad, I assume it's because you didn't know crunch meant let's work desperate to be employed people almost to death on ludicrous schedules so it looks like we're meeting budgets better than we would be under ethical labor standards, and if you don't get that, what the hell is wrong with you? Obviously, this is something the games industry needs to stop letting be an acceptable part of its culture. But as to the question of why it's part of that culture in the first place, I really do think it's mostly about the industry and the medium still having problems growing up and understanding whatever its new identity is going to be. The reason crunch mentality came about in the Western tech world is because so much of modern Silicon Valley was built up from a culture of upstart programmers and independent computer clubs who organically transferred the small indie garage business mentality of self-punishing grind work into the broader corporate structure without really realizing, or if we're being honest, caring all that much, that in doing so they were handing more cynical traditional corporate minds that both took over later and emerged among them an insidiously exploitable psychological tool. And anything that grows out of a giant-scale business desperately clinging to the affectation of scrappy youthful punk rock rebelliousness is gonna get supercharged to absurd degrees in gaming, where that attitude has defined the entire culture for the last 2 decades and counting. In fact, when you get right down to it, almost every shitty thing that's played out in this business, from sexual harassment to insipid journalism infighting to online bullying campaigns to games themselves that pander to the ugliest impulses and corporate cultures that want to spend, earn, and move among million-dollar budgets like serious, legit media megastars, but then still run their offices like it's a rented loft full of insurgent underdog frat boys with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove, goes back to this attitude. This is not a complicated issue, or at least it shouldn't be. Hard work should be hard on the work, not on your physical or mental well-being. The world of gaming in 2019, even on the fringiest fringe of the indie scene, is not the kill-or-be-killed Wild West anymore. And while it's frankly the least important part of this, badly treated people are going to turn out badly made games. It's time we took the bite out of crunch. Just a thought.